I don't see returning to the US anytime soon, actually.
Yeah.
Unless I'm forced to. Right.
Meet Robert Chadwick, an American who grew up in Boston, lived in Hawaii, and for the last 9 years has been residing in Singapore, where he founded a mortgage financing business. Robert shared with me a remarkable story about swimming in the Singapore River, his difficulties with Singlish, and why he would never return to the US. I'm Max, an entrepreneur and YouTuber from Singapore. Let's go!
When I first moved here to Singapore, I lived at Rivergate in River Valley, and I used to walk my dog around by Marina Bay Sands and around, through Boat Quay and so forth. And my dog was quite well behaved. There's a golden doodle, and so I used to take him off the leash, and he would just kind of walk and never had any issues. People loved him. They would pet him. One day, we're walking by Boat Quay, and there's a bunch of pigeons that are kind of congregating around there like they do. And the pigeons flew off towards the Fullerton Hotel, and my dog flew off with them into the canal and was swimming out he swam out into the center. And there were all these people eating dinner, right? And so I only had one option. I had to go into the canal. And so I took my shoes off, my shirt off. I jumped in the canal and I swam like halfway towards the Fullerton Hotel, grabbed them, swam back, and then when I came back in, it wasn't this idiot Angmo that had his dog off the leash and it jumped. It was this guy that saved this dog, right, by jumping in, and people were clapping and filming it.
You got an article in Mothership?
Right, yeah. Well, you know what, I had looked online many times because I was somebody had to have posted this because it was so outrageous. And by the way, that canal is. Don't get that water in your mouth. I thought I was going to die for probably a week after, right?
Did you have any cultural shocks when you came here first time?
Singlish.
Right,
certainly. I was looking for the subtitles half the time. But it's interesting because Hawaii has something called pidgin, which is very similar. When you take all these multicultural, especially the Asian cultures, when they all speak a variety of language, in Hawaii they went over to harvest the pineapples and the sugar cane and so forth. So they would have people from China, the Philippines, Japan, wherever it was, and they created their own language. Right? Singlish is a little bit like that. I mean, they have their own words that are kind of a mix of, maybe Mandarin and English, but it's their comfort language, right? It's just something they speak, but very difficult, especially when they start speaking very fast, for me to follow along, even after 8 years.
Best things about Singapore for you?
I have 2 children. I have a son that's 16 and another son that's 18. One that's 18 went off to university, and the first week he's at university, somebody steals his shoes, right?
Where?
In Boston.
In Boston.
And he was like, oh my God, this would never happen in Singapore or whatever. So of course, the safety factor. I mean, my kids go out at night. I don't have to be concerned that they're going to get into trouble. They're going to get hurt. So weather, safety, and I think just overall the kindness of the people is my favorite 3 things. And I think everybody should at some point, whether they're Singaporean or foreigners, spend some time outside of Singapore to actually, I guess, 1, to see kind of how special Singapore is with, the safety factor and so forth, but 2, to also be able to experience what, real things are. People steal, people do bad stuff, right? And that's not uncommon.
Some Singaporeans, they say in the comments, oh, if I fly to JFK and then I go out and I shoot to death straight away. I think it's a little bit of this media effect.
100%.
And what's your thoughts on it?
It's a bad issue that the U.S. has to face, but it's also a country of 300 million people, right?
Exactly.
So, the likelihood of someone getting randomly shot is probably fractional, but it's a sad, a sad reflection of what the U.S. has sort of become over the last decade.
Do you positive, generally about where U.S. is going?
Absolutely not. I think their foreign policy is bad. I mean, you being Russian, me being American, we can actually sit here and talk and have this conversation. That's the way it should be, right? This need to politicize everything, I think it's causing issues not only in America, but what happens in America spreads out globally, right? They're kind of their influence is not always positive, right? And that's my opinion.
Would you ever go back to the US? to live there?
I don't think so. Yeah, I don't know where I'll go after Singapore, if there is a place. After 15 years in Asia, I find my focus or my understanding is far more directed towards Asian culture than it is Western culture. I prefer the family values. So I don't see returning to the US anytime soon, actually. Yeah, unless I'm forced to. Right.
Through your work or through your business, did you met like celebrities, some famous people?
I've met a lot of very, very wealthy people, and in Singapore, when you meet a wealthy person, because we deal with a lot of really high-end transactions, these are extremely wealthy. To the point where you really, when you're looking at their net worth, you're surprised at how much they've accumulated. The amazing thing is, a lot of these people that have accumulated this wealth came from nothing. I mean, certainly, especially now, the younger guys, I mean, even guys maybe, 40 or 50, my age, they have a lot of wealth, but it was wealth their parents created. And their parents, came from Malaysia, they came from Indonesia, maybe they started some textile company or whatever, and they built these massive, generationally passed down wealth.
Are there any common features that shared among these high-level people?
I mean, I don't think it's just Singapore, but you see a lot of this in Singapore, is their drive. I mean, I'll give you an example. We have a client, without mentioning name, absolutely super successful here. He, certainly a billionaire, came from nothing, but this guy is, he's quite old. He's probably 80 years old or maybe older. Guy goes to the office every single day. I always think, I'm a fairly hard worker myself. I mean, I work a lot, but I always think if I had a few $1 billion, I would, buy a chalet somewhere and, enjoy life. But, the drive that these people have to be able to, probably initially it was to be able to provide for their family, but it's turned into almost like this competition amongst, the wealthy of, who has the bigger house, who has a nicer car, who has more businesses, etc.
You said you are pretty hardworking.
Yes.
What's the other main principles to be successful in business for you?
If you don't have the street smarts, or you're not clever enough to kind of outthink the next guy, you're only going to be kind of just at this level, right? I mean, I always tell this to my kids. I've told them since they were little, if you want to be a 10, you need to hang out with 10s. If you want to be a 5 or a 3, then you hang out with 3s and 5s. And I think that's with everything that you do in life. You have to do it to your best ability.
What's your top principles about personal finance?
Again, I'm a real estate guy, so I think everybody at some point should invest in real estate. I don't care if it's a $100,000 property in Malaysia or Vietnam or whatever it may be. You have to do it, and let that create your wealth. Again, it's my field, so I'm obviously biased, but I don't think there's a better wealth creator. And you can't time interest rates. Interest rates are high, it's probably a better time to buy. Interest rates will go back down, and then the frenzy will come, and then that property will be worth more.
Does it make sense to buy condo in Singapore, or is better to buy, is better to rent if you, let's say, become a PR, or you have American passport, so you don't pay the stamp duty tax?
Right now, with interest rates a bit on the high side, it may make more sense to rent, but the rents in Singapore have significantly increased over the last few years. I mean, they've doubled in most places, and so I think it depends on your long-term goals. If you were going to make Singapore your forever home, or if you were able to get in on a good buy, and you knew that you'd be able to churn it when you left, then absolutely. I mean, I'm always a big believer in investing in real estate. The problem with Singapore is it's the cost of the properties. That's where it's real limiting. I think that there
are no entry options like for 500.
Yeah. There's very few low entry options in Singapore, and especially if you're looking to get rental yield. Singapore is a tough place to do it. Rents now, although they're high, they're still not maybe where it should be for people to see proper rental yields. in my opinion anyway.
What are the opportunities in Singapore to leverage, to use money like bank money and then buy something like?
Yeah, I mean, Singapore still has bank loans. It's absolutely available. Interest rates, even though they're higher, are still, I think if you look at kind of a global scale, it's still fairly cheap. I think if you're borrowing to buy some of the HDB properties, they have a lot of good schemes. You know, Singapore is smart. They want everybody to have the opportunity to acquire properties to be able to live in. But the HDBs were never meant as investments. You know, now they've obviously appreciated in price and people are selling them and churning it, but that's not what it was created for. I mean, it was created to be able to provide housing for the masses, which is, I mean, I wish every country would do that.
Did you make like any big mistakes in your life?
I started a light bulb company. It's a very long story, but we wound up not being able to get this patent that we had tried for, and so it wound up being a huge financial issue. And you know, I had gotten a few friends into it, which you know unfortunately caused some ripples in the friendship and so forth. But yeah, I mean, you just turn around, you get back up.
You will have a good luck if you watch the next video right now. The only problem is it will be gone in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.